Hi, I'm Sophie. I don't usually tell my stories out loud, but there's something about what happened during my sister's wedding that I've been carrying with me. It's a story about family, judgment, and one moment that changed how I saw myself, and how others saw me too. I want to take you through it, from the beginning, so you really understand what I went through. My sister Emma and I have always been close. We grew up in a small town, in a pretty simple family. Nothing fancy, just regular people working hard to get by. Emma's always been the outgoing one, the kind of person everyone notices and remembers. I've always been more quiet, a little shy, and maybe that's why I never expected what came next. When Emma got engaged to Adam, her fiancé, things started to feel a little different. Adam's family was, well, let's just say they were different from ours. They had money, status, and a certain way of doing things that felt like a whole other world. I could tell from the start that they didn't really see us as equals. I tried not to let it bother me, but the way they looked at me sometimes, like I was some sort of joke, made my stomach twist. The day of the wedding was supposed to be a happy day. I was excited for Emma. I woke up early, feeling a mix of nerves and joy. My parents were busy helping out with other family members, so I ended up going to Adam's house early to help Emma get ready. I remember walking into that huge house, the kind with shiny floors and expensive furniture, and instantly feeling so out of place. I wasn't dressed in the latest fashion or adorned with jewelry. I was just wearing something simple, the kind of dress I'd wear to a family gathering. But to them, it might as well have been rags. I could feel their eyes on me the moment I stepped through the door. Not curious or welcoming, but cold and judging. I heard whispers behind closed doors. I caught glimpses of smirks and stifled laughs. "Who is she?" I overheard one woman ask another. "Why is she here alone?" I wanted to disappear. But Emma was counting on me, and I couldn't let her down. I stayed close to her side, helping her with her veil, fixing her hair, offering quiet smiles when she looked nervous. I tried to block out the feelings that the room was a cold place, a place where I wasn't supposed to belong. But it was hard. They didn't know me. They didn't know my story, the struggles I'd been through, the sacrifices my family had made, or the person I was beneath the surface. To them, I was just the poor girl who showed up without family, without status, without anything that mattered. I kept telling myself, it's okay. This isn't about you. This is about Emma. Be strong. But then the laughter started to get louder. Some of the relatives made jokes just loud enough for me to hear. I tried not to react. I forced a smile. But inside, I was breaking. It wasn't just the strangers either. Even some of Emma's closest friends seemed to look at me like I was a mistake. It felt like I was standing in a room full of people who saw me as less than nothing. I wanted to leave. To run out of that house and never come back. But I couldn't. Emma was getting married. This was her day. I owed it to her to stay. Then, just when I thought I couldn't bear any more, something happened. An older man, someone I hadn't noticed before, walked up quietly beside me. He was Adam's uncle, a man known for his strictness and pride. Usually, people stayed out of his way. But he looked at me in a way no one else had, calm, kind, and respectful. Without saying much, he gave a small bow. It wasn't fake or mocking. It was genuine. Then he said something that surprised me more than anything else that day. You carry yourself with dignity, even when others do not see it. I want you to know that your worth is far greater than what these walls understand. Those words hit me like a warm light in a cold room. For the first time all day, I felt seen. Not as the poor girl or the outsider, but as someone worthy of respect. His kindness gave me strength. I realized that no matter what anyone else thought, I had to believe in myself. I was more than their judgment, more than their laughter. I looked around the room again. The same people who had ignored or ridiculed me were now watching that man in me, but this time with a different expression, curiosity, maybe even respect. That moment changed everything. I stood a little taller after that. I smiled a little brighter. And I knew I wasn't going to let anyone's opinion define me or my sister's special day. That day taught me that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of a person's life. It taught me to hold my head high, even when the world tries to put you down. And it was just the beginning. There's so much more to this story, the challenges, the confrontations, and the way things eventually turned around. But I wanted you to hear this first part, to understand what it felt like to be the girl who walked into a room full of strangers and laughter, only to find respect in the most unexpected place. Thank you for listening to me. I'll share more soon. The day wore on, and the soft buzz of conversation filled the room, but beneath the surface, the tension was palpable. I sat beside Emma, watching her laugh and chat with Adam's family, but the feeling of being an outsider clung to me like a shadow. Every now and then, a glance or whisper reminded me I was still the other, the girl who didn't quite belong. As the afternoon light filtered through the curtains, I caught myself retreating into my thoughts. The laughter and warmth around me felt like a world away. I reminded myself why I was there, for Emma, my sister, my anchor. She had always been my strength, and today, I wanted to be hers. When Emma excused herself to greet a relative, I leaned back and tried to blend into the background. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, judged. A few heads turned in my direction, followed by quiet whispers that felt loud enough to echo in my ears. I clenched my fists beneath the table, fighting the sting of humiliation. Suddenly, a presence came beside me. Adam's uncle, the same man who had bowed to me earlier, sat down quietly, his expression calm yet firm. He didn't say much at first, just handed me a glass of water and nodded encouragingly. It was an unspoken solidarity that made me realize I wasn't completely alone. He leaned in and said softly, "You have a strength that isn't always easy to see. Hold on to that. This is just the beginning." His words were a balm to my bruised spirit, a reminder that I was more than their judgments. The rest of the afternoon unfolded in a blur of smiles, conversations, and moments where I had to remind myself to keep standing tall. At one point, a group of Adam's cousins started to whisper louder, their words sharp and cutting. I caught a few fragments. Why is she even here? Who does she think she is? And felt the sting deepen. I wanted to speak up, to defend myself, but fear kept my voice silent. I didn't want to create any problems for Emma, especially not on her big day. Instead, I sat quietly, trying to focus on the joyous moments amid the undercurrent of unease. Later, Emma pulled me aside, her eyes searching mine. "I see what's happening," she whispered. "Don't let them get to you. You're my sister, and you belong here." Her words were a lifeline. They reminded me that no matter what anyone else thought, I had a place in this new family, even if it wasn't always easy to find. As evening approached, the party moved outside to the garden, where fairy lights twinkled overhead and the cool air carried the scent of blooming flowers. Emma pulled me to the dance floor, smiling brightly. "Come on," she urged. "Let's dance." I hesitated, feeling the weight of all the eyes still on me, but her hand was warm in mine. For a few moments, I let myself forget the whispers, the stares, and just danced, with my sister, with joy in my heart. But the relief was brief. As I looked around, I saw a small group watching us, their expressions skeptical. I felt the familiar burn of judgment, but then Adam's uncle appeared beside me once more. His voice was low but firm. "She is family. Treat her with respect." The room seemed to quiet at his words. I could see some faces soften, others shift uncomfortably. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. That night, I realized something important, that even in a place where you feel least accepted, there can be unexpected allies. That sometimes, respect comes not from everyone, but from the few who see your worth. In the days that followed, the challenges didn't disappear. Family gatherings were often tense, with old attitudes lingering beneath polite smiles. But I was no longer invisible. I spoke up when I needed to, and slowly, the walls between me and them began to crack. One evening, at a smaller gathering, a relative made a snide comment about how I showed up alone and stayed out of place. I felt the familiar sting, but before I could retreat into silence, Adam's uncle stood beside me. "Enough," he said firmly. "Sophie is family. If you cannot show her respect, then you do not understand what family means." His words silenced the room. I felt a swell of gratitude and newfound confidence. Through it all, I learned that belonging isn't about perfect acceptance. It's about finding the strength to stand tall, even when the world whispers otherwise. And that strength, that quiet, unwavering strength, is something I discovered inside myself that summer. The days after the wedding were a whirlwind of emotions. Emma and Adam had started their new life together, and while my role in the celebrations was over, my place within their intertwined families was just beginning to be tested. What I thought would be simple support for my sister turned into a deeper challenge, one that would push me to confront not just others, but my own sense of worth. The morning after the wedding, I woke up early and found myself sitting alone in Emma's new apartment. It was a beautiful space, filled with fresh flowers and gifts, but I felt strangely disconnected from it all. Emma had gone out to meet Adam's parents for breakfast, and I was left with my thoughts swirling. I thought about the previous day, the moments of cold stares, the whispered judgments, and that one unexpected, gentle kindness from Adam's uncle. His respect had meant more to me than I could put into words, but it also highlighted just how much I still had to prove, to them, and maybe even to myself. That morning, I decided I wouldn't let the shadow of their opinions darken my spirit anymore. I wanted to be more than the girl who walked in alone, who was quietly dismissed. I wanted to stand tall, not just for Emma, but for me. Later that day, Emma invited me to come with her to meet some of Adam's extended family. I felt nervous but said yes. The truth was, I wanted to face these people head-on, to let them see me for who I really was. We arrived at a sprawling house filled with laughter and the smell of rich food. Adam's relatives greeted us with warm smiles, or at least, the polite versions of warmth they saved for guests. I noticed a few eyes flick toward me, some curious, others guarded. As the gathering continued, I made an effort to engage, asking questions about family traditions and sharing stories about Emma and me. I could see some of the walls around me beginning to crumble, little by little. But old habits die hard. Midway through the evening, one of Adam's cousins made a careless remark, loud enough for me to hear but subtle enough to mask it as a joke. "Must be tough being the poor girl trying to fit in with the fancy crowd," she said with a smirk. I felt a flush of heat rise in my cheeks. For a moment, I thought about retreating, about pulling back into the safety of silence. But then I remembered the strength Adam's uncle had shown me, the respect he had quietly demanded for me. So I took a breath and met the cousin's eyes. "I'm here because Emma asked me to be," I said softly but firmly. "And because I'm family now." There was a silence that stretched out, then a few people shifted awkwardly. I didn't wait for their approval. I simply smiled and turned to talk to someone else. Later, Adam's uncle came up to me again. "I saw how you handled that," he said quietly. "You're stronger than you know." Those words became a mantra for me. Every time I felt the sting of judgment, I reminded myself of that quiet strength inside. In the weeks that followed, I found myself more involved in family events. Some days were better than others. Sometimes, people surprised me, offering genuine smiles or thoughtful conversations. Other times, the whispers and cold shoulders returned like an unwelcome shadow. One particular afternoon stands out. It was a sunny weekend, and the family had gathered for a picnic at a nearby park. I was sitting on a blanket beside Emma, watching children play and adults chat, when I felt someone approach. It was the bride's aunt, a woman I'd barely spoken to before. She sat beside me, a little hesitance in her eyes. "I wanted to say," she began slowly, "I didn't really understand you before. But seeing how you've been here for Emma, how you handle things with such grace, it's made me rethink some things." I was surprised. Her words felt like an olive branch, a small but meaningful step toward acceptance. We talked for a while, sharing stories and laughter. It was one of those moments that reminded me why it was worth holding on, the possibility that even the coldest walls could someday warm. But it wasn't all easy. There were still difficult days, moments when I questioned whether this was worth it. When I felt the weight of being judged, I'd sometimes retreat to a quiet corner, fighting tears I didn't want anyone to see. On one of those days, I called Emma, desperate to hear a familiar voice. "Why does it have to be so hard?" I asked her, my voice breaking. Emma was silent for a moment, then said, "Because you're strong, Sophie. And because this family is learning how to accept you. Sometimes, people hold on to old ideas and fear change. But you're changing things, just by being yourself." Her words lifted me. I realized that belonging isn't about everyone loving you instantly. It's about being patient, persistent, and true to who you are. As the months went on, I grew into my new role. I wasn't just the shy girl who walked into a room and felt invisible anymore. I was Sophie, a sister, a family member, someone who refused to be defined by others' judgments. And through it all, Adam's uncle remained a quiet but steady presence. His respect never wavered, and his example taught me how to carry myself with dignity even when others tried to tear me down. Looking back now, I see that summer not just as the season of a wedding, but as the season of my own awakening. It was a time of struggle and growth, of pain and unexpected kindness. It was the moment I learned that sometimes, family isn't just the people you're born to, it's the people who stand by you when it counts. And for me, that made all the difference. The weeks turned into months, and with every passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, more sure of who I was within this new and complicated family dynamic. But strength doesn't mean the struggle disappears. In fact, sometimes it feels like the harder you try to hold on to it, the more it's tested. One afternoon, Emma invited me to join her and Adam for a visit to his workplace. I was hesitant at first. I wasn't sure if I belonged there, or how I'd be received. But Emma insisted. "Sophie, this is part of their world now, and it's time you saw it," she said with a gentle smile. So, I agreed. We arrived at a sleek office building downtown, where Adam worked as a manager. The place was buzzing with activity, phones ringing, people chatting, the hum of computers. I felt nervous walking through those polished halls, a girl who'd grown up far from this kind of world. As we entered the conference room for a meeting, I noticed a man standing near the door. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with the kind of confidence I'd only ever seen in movies. I recognized him immediately. He was Adam's boss, someone Emma had mentioned before, but I'd never met. Before I could say anything, the man turned toward me and, to my surprise, gave a respectful nod and a slight bow. "Ms. Sophie," he said warmly, "it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about your support for Emma." His words caught me off guard. Here was someone, not even family, showing me respect in a way I hadn't expected, a stark contrast to the whispers and sideways glances I'd endured for so long. Emma smiled, clearly proud. "Sophie's been a rock for me," she said quietly. That moment felt like a quiet victory, a sign that the world I was stepping into was starting to acknowledge me not as an outsider, but as part of the family circle. After the meeting, Adam's boss took us on a brief tour around the office, introducing me to colleagues and sharing stories about the work they did. I found myself relaxing, even enjoying the experience. It was strange, this place, which at first felt intimidating and foreign, now seemed like a small part of the life Emma and Adam were building together. And I was there with them. Later, as we left the building, Adam's boss turned to me again. "Sophie, I want you to know that respect isn't given lightly in my world. But from what I've seen, you've earned it." His words settled deep inside me, reminding me that sometimes, respect is about actions, about character, not about where you come from or what you wear. That evening, back at the apartment, I told Emma about the day, about how unexpected kindness had shown up in the most unlikely places. She smiled and said, "See? People notice strength. They notice who really supports those they love." But strength came with its own battles. Over the next few weeks, while some doors were opening, others seemed firmly closed. Certain relatives continued to treat me with suspicion, their coldness a constant reminder that acceptance was a journey, not a destination. At one family dinner, I was seated beside the bride's aunt, the same woman who had offered me an olive branch at the picnic months before. This time, her warmth was more genuine, and we shared stories about our childhoods, our dreams. But nearby, a cousin muttered something about how I was still trying to fit in where I didn't belong. The words were barely audible, but the sting was real. I looked toward the aunt, who caught my eye and gave a small, encouraging nod. That silent support gave me the courage to stay present, to not shrink away. One evening, Adam's uncle invited me for tea. We sat in his quiet study, surrounded by books and photographs. He poured the tea carefully and said, "Sophie, I want you to know that your presence here is not just tolerated, it is valued. You are family." His words were more than comfort, they were a declaration. And they became the foundation I leaned on during tough moments. It wasn't just about me anymore. I saw how Emma blossomed with my support, how our bond grew even stronger. Together, we navigated the complex waters of merging families, traditions, and expectations. But I also discovered something else, that sometimes, you have to stand firm even when those closest to you are uncertain. When judgments and doubts cloud the air, it's your own belief that keeps you steady. I learned to speak up, to defend my place without anger but with quiet confidence. Each time I did, the family around me began to shift, slowly but surely. The summer ended, and with autumn's arrival came new challenges and new opportunities. One day, Emma invited me to join her at a family meeting where important decisions were being made about the future. I was nervous, knowing that I'd be surrounded by people who still saw me as the outsider. But when I arrived, Adam's uncle greeted me first. "Sophie," he said, "you have a voice here now. Don't be afraid to use it." Those words gave me courage. During the meeting, I listened carefully as discussions unfolded, plans for holidays, family gatherings, even business decisions that involved both sides. When it was my turn, I spoke calmly and honestly about what I thought was best for Emma and Adam. To my surprise, some of the family members nodded in agreement. Others remained quiet, but I could see respect in their eyes. Walking home that evening, I felt a quiet pride. This was my family now, with all its complexities and contradictions. And I was part of it. Looking back, I realized that the journey wasn't about changing them, it was about changing me. Finding the strength to be seen, to claim my place, and to never let others' opinions define my worth. It's been a long road, full of hard lessons and small victories. But every moment has taught me that respect, kindness, and belonging often come from the most unexpected places. And as I stand here today, beside Emma, I know that no matter what happens, we'll face it together, stronger, wiser, and united. The changing seasons brought a shift not only in the weather but in the atmosphere around the family. The coldness that had hung over me like a thick fog began to thin, replaced slowly by tentative warmth. But healing and acceptance don't come all at once, and with each step forward, there were still moments that tested my resolve. One chilly morning, Emma and I were sitting in the kitchen of her apartment, sipping tea and talking about the future. She was glowing with happiness from newlywed bliss, but I could tell she was thinking about the family dynamics just as much as I was. "Things have changed a lot," she said quietly, stirring her cup. "But I know we still have a long way to go." I nodded. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough." Emma reached over and squeezed my hand. "You are. More than you realize." That simple reassurance gave me strength. I realized that being strong didn't mean never feeling doubt. It meant pushing through those moments and continuing to believe in yourself. A few days later, we were invited to a formal family dinner hosted by Adam's parents. It was one of those events that felt both important and intimidating, the kind of gathering where old traditions and unspoken expectations ruled. I carefully chose my outfit, wanting to present myself as confidently as possible. When we arrived, the grandeur of the house took my breath away. The polished floors, ornate chandeliers, and delicate china all reminded me how different this world was from where I grew up. The dinner began with polite conversation, but I could feel the undercurrent of scrutiny as I was introduced to each family member. Some offered genuine smiles, others barely masked their judgment. At one point, a distant relative asked me about my job. I spoke honestly about the small business I had started months ago, a modest venture selling handmade crafts online. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she commented, "That's interesting. It's hard to make a real living that way, isn't it?" The remark was cutting, but I refused to let it shake me. I simply smiled and said, "It's something I love, and it's growing every day." Later, Adam's uncle caught my eye across the table and gave a subtle nod of approval. His quiet support meant more than I could say. As the evening wore on, I found myself engaged in deeper conversations with a few family members who were genuinely curious about me. We talked about dreams, challenges, and the meaning of family. One woman, who had previously been cold toward me, surprised me by saying, "You have a quiet strength, Sophie. I'm glad Emma has you by her side." Those words felt like a balm to my soul. But even amidst progress, there were moments that brought old wounds to the surface. After dinner, as we were leaving, I overheard a whispered comment from a group nearby, "She's trying too hard." The sting was immediate, but instead of retreating, I took a deep breath and held my head high. I realized that no matter what others thought, I had earned my place here through patience, grace, and unwavering support for my sister. In the weeks that followed, my small business began to grow. Orders came in steadily, and I started to feel a new sense of independence and pride. Emma cheered me on, proud of the woman I was becoming. One afternoon, while packaging an order, I received a call from Adam's boss, the same man who had bowed to me months earlier. "Miss Sophie," he said warmly, "I wanted to invite you to a charity gala the company is hosting next month. It would be an honor to have you as a guest." I was surprised and thrilled. This invitation wasn't just about the event, it was a recognition of me, someone who had started from far outside their circle and was slowly but surely making her mark. When I told Emma, she hugged me tightly. "See? You belong everywhere you want to be." As the gala approached, I prepared nervously but with excitement. It felt like a new chapter, a chance to step fully into a world I'd only glimpsed before. The night of the gala was magical. The grand ballroom glittered with lights and laughter. I dressed in a gown that made me feel elegant and confident. As I entered, I spotted Adam's boss across the room. He greeted me warmly and introduced me to several influential people. Throughout the evening, I found myself engaged in conversations about art, business, and community. People listened when I spoke, asked questions, and even complimented my work. It was a far cry from the whispers and judgment I'd faced just months before. By the end of the night, I realized that the respect I'd earned wasn't about appearances or money, it was about who I was and how I carried myself. Walking home with Emma the next day, I felt a quiet pride. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every moment. Looking back on everything, I understand now that family isn't just about blood or tradition. It's about acceptance, support, and sometimes, the courage to stand alone and say, "I belong." And as I continue to